Thank you, sir, for the introduction. I thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to talk about my work here. So I'll be talking today about engineering 2D electron and hole gases at silicon-silicon germanium interfaces. And this work has been done in collaboration with Para, Professor Anil Shaji, Professor Madhu Talukulam at IISc Trivandrum, and my PhD supervisor, Professor Shobna Narasimhan. So the motivation for studying silicon-silicon germanium interfaces and two-dimensional electron and hole gases, I'll introduce two-dimensional electron and hole gases. So suppose you have two materials, for example, one semiconductor, and you bring another material on top of it and you join them together, then you can actually have a two-dimensional electron gas at the interface. So it's basically confinement of electrons or holes in the plane parallel to the interface, but these electrons or holes cannot move perpendicular to the interface. So the motivation for studying 2D electron gas at these semiconductor interfaces is that the 2DEG has been exploited for a number of different applications, such as for devices like MOSFETs and to study fundamental physics. And it has been found that if you gate two-dimensional electron gas, it can result in the formation of quantum dots. And these quantum dots, if you have a single unpaired electron in them, then they can be used as semiconducting spin qubits. So I talk about the origins of two-dimensional electron gas. I mean, how exactly this two-dimensional electron or hole gas is formed at the interface. So in different systems, you have different origin of this 2DEG or 2D hole gas. For example, if you have polar-polar or polar non-polar materials coming together, then 2DEG can be formed from electronic reconstruction. And this will be talked about in detail by Arpan Das on 25th. And today I'll focus on semiconductor-semiconductor interfaces, where the 2DEG and 2D hole gas can arise from charge accumulation at the interface due to band offsets. Yeah, so the system that I'm interested in is a heterostructure material. So if you see here, we have a strained silicon grown on top of silicon germanium alloy. It's a substrate. And then it is capped with modulation dope silicon germanium. So basically, the 2D electron gas is supposed to arise here, and the dopant is placed not exactly near to the carriers at the interface. I'll show in a moment, but they are sort of far away from the interface so that these electrons or carriers do not scatter from the ionized donor impurities. So that increases the mobility of the carriers, and this is known as the modulation doping effect. So in some cases, one may have to apply a gate voltage to get a 2D electron gas, and this is formed right here at this interface. And if you can further gate the 2D electron gas on top of it, then you can actually confine some of the electrons in some region, and then you can use it to form quantum dots and further use it for qubit applications. So what's the current status of knowledge about silicon-silicon germanium heterostructures? So it has been long and widely studied, but mostly experimentally. And these studies have been experimental with germanium concentration in the alloy, silicon germanium, and the dopant concentration, as I showed, the modulation dopant concentration. It's determined more or less by trial and error. And most previous reports of 2DEG have been found. For example, if you look at this particular example of a paper and many much similar papers showing a qubit device, it uses 30% germanium, or X is equal to 0.3 if I have SiGe alloy, Si1 minus X and GeX concentration. So mostly they use 30%. And for band alignment between the two materials, there has been only one earlier DFT study to the best of our knowledge, and only done for few concentrations, and that too with some empirical parameters into consideration. And even the type of band alignment has been a matter of debate. So we hope to solve some of the problems. So we realize that this system is important for a number of applications. So we need a systematic and accurate first principle study. And our experimental group, they asked us to determine whether the concentration that we usually use in experiments is optimal for the formation of 2D electron gas or a whole gas. So coming to the formation of this 2D electron gas or whole gas, how does it arise? So basically it's a combination of the factors that lead to formation of this electron gas is actually because of strain in silicon, concentration of germanium in the alloy, and this leads to a favorable band alignment between the two materials at the interface. I'll talk about this in detail. And second thing is the modulation doping in silicon germanium. I mean, that actually leads to the shift in position of Fermi level. I'll show that in detail. So I now present DFT calculations, the methods and results. So these are the computational details. I've used density functional theory using projector augmented wave method of pseudopotentials implemented in WASP. And these are the rest of the computational details. We have used exchange correlation functionals as local density approximation, generalized gradient approximation, and HAC06 hybrid functionals. Now, what are the challenges for analyzing the system and computational study for silicon on silicon germanium is basically to investigate this alloy. We need, if you want to do it for many different values of X, you need very large supercells. So that makes the calculations very, very expensive. And simple and cheap exchange correlation functionals, they do not yield correct band gaps. In my case, in this case, band alignment is very important property. So we need to get the band gaps correctly. And the band structures of silicon and silicon germanium, they use different reference energy levels. This is one of the main issues that you cannot it's not very straightforward to calculate the band alignment. So what are the solutions? So in the first one, we have used virtual crystal approximation, where we have, instead of where we have a new species which is made up of, let's say you have an alloy made of this atom and this atom, you replace the system by taking all the atoms which are somewhat a combination of these two and in certain fractions in which you want to do the calculations. So then we use to address the problem of exchange correlation functionals, we use hybrid functional calculations which are expensive but they are very accurate. And for the band structures that they cannot be compared directly, we need to have certain procedure which I'll now describe how to find the band alignment. So how do we calculate the band alignment is for these two materials, if I have band structures and band edges, they do not follow a common reference level. So here, what I do is first I take the bulk material and I find the distance of, so this is energy and this is Z coordinate along the material, these are the atoms. And if you have the band edges and you plot the planar average electrostatic potential and take the macroscopic average and you measure the distance of these edges from the macroscopic average, and then you take slab of the material where you have a bulk-like region and then it's terminated by vacuum, and then you take the distance of vacuum energy from the macroscopic average. So we are doing this all to find the band edges with respect to vacuum energy, which is common for both the materials. So here from step 1, I have from the bulk macroscopic average electrostatic potential, the distance of the band edges, and from the step 2, I have the vacuum energy distance. So then I can compute EV and EC with respect to vacuum energy for both the materials. And now I can subtract and see what is the difference between the two materials' band edges. So I present the results. So what could be the possible type of band alignment between two materials that one can get? So there are 3 types of band alignment possible. One is the type 1, where you have, this is material 1, in magenta and orange you have material 2. So you have conduction band edge of first material higher than that of second material, and then this is the placement of valence bands. So there is a charge transfer possible like this. And then you have a type 2 alignment, where you have conduction band edge of first material higher than that of second, and also the valence band edge is higher than the second material. And then there is a broken type of alignment, where you have conduction band and then a valence band of the first material, and then you have a conduction band, a valence band of the second material. So there has been a long running controversy about this material, that what could be the type of alignment at silicon and silicon germanium interfaces. So we wish to study that and solve that. So in my calculations, since I showed you the heterostructure, so we have silicon germanium and then there is silicon. So size of silicon germanium atoms is basically larger than the size of silicon atoms. So when silicon is deposited on silicon germanium, it will be under strain. So it will be biaxially strained, it will be stretched to match the lattice constant of silicon germanium in the XY plane, and in the Z plane it will be relaxed. So there is a lattice mismatch between the two, which leads to biaxial straining of silicon. And so I have put the lattice constant of strained silicon in the XY plane equal to the lattice constant of silicon germanium. So if we look at the standard DFT exchange correlation functionals and look at the behavior of lattice constant of silicon germanium alloys with respect to concentration of germanium in the alloy, then we find out, so all the bulk systems, they are in diamond structure. This is silicon and silicon germanium alloys. So if you see, look at the local density approximation, the yellow curve, and black one is the experimental curve. So it matches well with some values, but it's still underestimated for silicon and germanium. For GGA, if you see, all the values are overestimated for all values of X. So if I look at the band gaps of silicon germanium, and just to decide, so if I look at the band gap of silicon germanium alloys with concentration of germanium, and you look at LDA with virtual crystal approximation, it follows the trend, but it's underestimated than the experimental values. And GGA completely fails because it shows metallic nature of at 0.8 and beyond. For germanium, it finds it as a metal. So this is completely wrong, and we cannot continue. We move to expensive hybrid functional calculations, which are accurate, and we see here it works well in this case. So if I find the band gap of silicon germanium alloys with germanium concentration, it follows very well agreement with the experimental curve. So VCA and HSC06 is working fine. So now this is the result that I get by following the procedure to find the band alignment. So this is the energy. I've placed the conduction and valence band edges of these materials. So this will be for silicon germanium conduction band edge. This is silicon conduction band edge. These are the valence band edges of these materials calculated for different concentrations of germanium. So if I look at this graph and look at very low concentrations till about 0.25, then you see here that the valence band has certain offset, but there is zero conduction band offset in the two materials. So the band alignment is somewhat none of the three possibilities that I showed you, but it's somewhat like in between 1 and 2, where you don't have a conduction band offset, but you do have a valence band offset. So this could also explain the confusing experimental reports that people were getting. And this actually predicts the formation of 2D whole gas. And the results are in agreement with the experiment, where they have found a 2D whole gas for X is equal to 0.15. And this is the first explanation that for low values, if you take germanium concentration at these values, you will actually get a 2D whole gas. So How do you get that? I'll just show in a moment. So if I want to understand how does this 2D whole gas form, so I have two materials, silicon germanium and silicon on the other side. So this is when they are not in contact. So I showed you there's no conduction band offset, but there is a valence band offset. Now if you join the two materials, the Fermi level is going to be matched. It has to be a constant. Then what happens is the bands bend so that the Fermi level is same on both the sides. So they bend in such a way, and suppose I put up a dopant in silicon germanium here, then we know a p-type dopant will move the Fermi level down towards the valence band. So if you see, then the matched Fermi level will sort of lie here, and then you get a 2D whole gas in the system. So this is how we explained. And then if I come to formation of 2D electron gas, if you look at the other part of the band alignment diagram, at concentrations greater than 0.25, you have a conduction band offset opening up and it increases. And there's also a valence band offset. And to mention here, there is a conduction band edge of silicon germanium is higher than that of silicon. So this type of band alignment, this is type 2 band alignment. Okay. So it will favor the formation of 2D electron gas, and the electron confinement, since the conduction band edge of silicon is lower than that of silicon germanium, the electrons will be confined on the silicon side. And this also matches with the experiment. So if I see at 0.3, which people use mostly for devices, I find a type 2 band alignment which should favor the formation of 2D electron gas. I'll show in a moment. So this is again similar diagrams made for semiconductors not in contact. So I have certain conduction band offset as well as a valence band offset here. And if I join the two materials together, the bands bend. And if I'm able to move the Fermi level by appropriate doping, such as N-type doping in silicon germanium, then the band should, the Fermi level should move in such a way that you can actually have a 2D electron gas. So this is how type 2 band alignment can give rise to a 2D electron gas if you have an N-type dopant. On the other hand, you also have a valence band offset. So if you're able to move the Fermi level by p-type doping in silicon germanium, then you can also have a two-dimensional whole gas. But this is our prediction, and we hope to verify this by further calculations on heterostructures and also experimentally. So this hasn't been reported so far. So if I conclude and talk about what's the optimum concentration of germanium so that one can obtain a 2D electron gas or a whole gas, then one thing more one has to consider here is, see, if you keep on increasing the germanium concentration in the alloy, we have silicon deposited on top of it. So the lattice mismatch is going to increase. So it increases linearly. If experimentally it's to obtain disorder-free growth of one material on the other, you cannot have a lattice mismatch greater than a certain value. So if I cap it to a certain value, about 2% lattice mismatch between silicon and silicon germanium alloy, then I get this range of concentration which is possible. So 0.25, greater than 0.25, I was getting a type 2 band alignment, and I cap it at 0.5 concentration. So we suggest that 2D electron gas can be formed for these concentrations, and this range 0.3 to 0.5 has been set as a suggestion by our calculations, but we need to make X as large as possible so that we can have a disorder-free commensurate growth, and still we have a proper band alignment. And for a 2D whole gas, we need low values of X, around 0.2 is what we suggest. And also, okay, so I have a slide on open questions on these systems now. We now are not sure about how thick should the silicon be. So we'll do calculations on that. What should be the best dopant in the silicon germanium layer, and what will be the dopant concentration, what will be the effect of gating, and I'm performing now the calculations on heterostructures which are currently in progress. So I conclude. So we have found that the band gaps of silicon germanium alloys obtained with HSC06 and virtual crystal approximation, they are in excellent agreement with the experiment. Then for less than 0.25%, we have found a new type of band alignment, which is, as I have explained. So this is expected to give rise to 2D whole gas, and this is in agreement with the experimental reports. For greater than 0.25 germanium concentration, we have type 2 band alignment, and which is also in agreement with the experiment. And if you have to get a 2D electron gas, we suggest that you need to have X 0.25 to 0.5 with a N-type doping in silicon germanium, as I showed. And if you need a 2D whole gas, we need X around 0.2. And we have also predicted here that 2D whole gas for larger X will also be formed if you have a P-type doping in silicon germanium. So that ends. Thank you.
Thank you, Garima. Any quick questions?
So, how do you construct your okay, so this virtual crystal approximation, it has been used as implemented in WASP. So it's, yeah, so mixing of pseudopotentials, we have seen that the outer electronic configurations and all the things match up for the two cases, silicon and silicon germanium. And we have used the inbuilt.
Okay, if there are no more questions, then let's thank the speaker, and let's thank actually both the speakers of this session. And